Do you want to connect with people emotionally and leave a lasting impression? Do you want your client to take action and purchase your services if you know you can help them, but you don't want to sound salesy or intrusive or overbearing emotionally? Well, storytelling is a way to create a connection. Let people know who you are. It tells your listeners you can understand them and that you can be trusted. In other words, you create an emotional experience for your clients, friends, and family. Now, Michael Hauge is an expert at storytelling and will provide you with invaluable insights on how to craft a compelling story. Welcome to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Katrina Berus, and today we have Michael Hauge. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here at last.
Yes, at last. That's true. So, tell us, why should authors, speakers, and business leaders tell great stories? What's in it for them?
Well, the number one reason you want to tell a story is because stories create connection. So let's say you're a business person and you want to persuade somebody to take some action. You either want them to hire you or hire your company, buy your product, or perhaps you're just giving a presentation or writing a book that will help change their lives, that help them live better. But in any case, you're going to ask of them to do something to achieve whatever goal they want and what you want. And the most important thing you can do when you're trying to persuade anybody to do anything is to create a connection with that person. Because no matter how much data we hear, no matter how many recommendations we might have been and so on, when we encounter you through your book or through your speech or through your podcast or through your webinar, we want to know, who are you? And are you an expert? And do you understand me? And do you have a plan to help me solve my problems or achieve my goals? And can I trust you? And do I like you? And those are all emotional decisions that grow out of the connection we feel to you. And stories are the most powerful and quickest and most efficient way to create an emotional experience that's going to create that connection and answer all those questions that we're asking about you when we first encounter you.
Great, to create that emotional experience, connection, since we know that decisions are made on the emotional level much more than the rational. So tell us, what are the essential components of a great story?
Well, it depends. It depends how detailed you want to get. The foundation of a story, the number one things you must have to elicit that emotional experience, to create that connection, is the story must have a hero, okay? And by hero, I just mean a protagonist, the main character. It must have a character that we're rooting for, that we identify with, that we feel an emotional and psychological connection to. And then that hero must be pursuing some objective. There must be something that character wants. It can't just be static or stationary, or it can't just be a story about the day in the life of someone, and unless during that day they desperately wanted to either achieve a goal that was out of their reach or overcome a problem. Usually it's going to be that. So you need a hero that we identify with, that we connect to. That hero has to have some goal. And by the way, the more visible and specific, the more we can imagine what achieving that goal looks like, the more powerful the story will be. And last of all, there must be obstacles for that character to overcome. There has to be conflict, because while a desire in the story drives the story forward, it gives us something to look forward to, and the hero something to pursue that we're anticipating them achieving. It's the obstacles that hero faces, it's the conflict they have to overcome that elicits the emotion. I mean, my background is in Hollywood. I've been working in Hollywood for more than 40 years now. And one of the reasons when I work with business leaders and entrepreneurs that I can be effective is if their goal is to elicit emotion, Hollywood is like the world capital of emotion. As a friend of mine says, it's the emotion picture capital of the world, because the reason Hollywood is so successful is they learned a century ago, this is how you get people to feel. Okay. So when we hear your story, it's the same as if we're going into a movie theater. We're picturing a movie inside our minds as we hear what you have to say. And if you think about, if you're a movie fan at all, if you've ever enjoyed any movie or TV series or whatever, if you think about the most memorable moments in the story, it's going to be the moments where the hero is really up against it, facing seemingly insurmountable obstacles, or it's going to be the moment of elation when they finally achieve the thing they're going after.
So give us a few examples, even if you refer to films.
Well, yeah, I can do either one. So let's take a movie like Hitch. Okay, that's one of my favorite movies. I worked with Will Smith for quite a few years, and I was on retainer with him. And I found out when I first met him, this is after he made Hitch, I found out that he was familiar with my process and was actually using it when they were writing the script of Hitch. And so Hitch is a story about a date doctor, a guy who helps other men find true love and be able to connect with the person of their dreams, the woman of their dreams. But he is someone who doesn't want to get involved deeply because he had his heart broken. He thinks real love isn't for him because he's so terrified he's going to have to suffer that pain again. So the goal he's going after, there are really two. One is he meets a woman and he wants to win her love. He wouldn't call it that. He just wants to have a relationship or be with her or get into bed with her or whatever. But that's his goal. The problem is that everything he tries to do, he flubs up. His method isn't working on himself. And also the conflict is, even though he's falling in love with her, he's terrified of allowing himself to do that. So those obstacles have to be overcome in order for him to achieve the climax of the movie. And I won't spoil the ending, but it's a romantic comedy out of Hollywood, so you sort of can guess. Is he going to be vulnerable enough and be able to win her love and overcome his fear? And in that same movie, by the way, there's another character that he is helping win his true love. So he's actually got both of those goals going on.
So the mentor is the one that helps him achieve that goal?
Well, he's the hero of that movie, but he is also acting as the mentor, as the guide, what I call the reflection character for the Kevin James character, Albert, he's named. Okay, so if you want to switch that, let's take that to business, okay? One of the first business stories I ever helped anybody with, when I started expanding outside of Hollywood, I got a call from a guy named Matt Basak, who was a high-level internet marketer. He wanted a new story to use in a webinar to promote a new course he had created on being a successful internet marketer. And the story he came to me with, he thought it would be valuable to tell the story about how he was investigated by the IRS for no reason he could discern, and he had done nothing wrong, but he, as a result, had to shut down everything he was doing and really start over. Okay, so he wanted help with that. So when he came to see me, okay, I say, that's a great story. We're going to start with the fact that in that story, you're the hero. So you're going to tell the story about yourself. And your goal is to somehow build your business from scratch after your lawyer tells you you can't keep doing what you're doing or the IRS is going to try and put you in jail. And we're going to start that story when they come and tell you you're under investigation. And so my work with him was about focusing everything in on what were the steps he had to take in order to overcome those obstacles of the IRS in order to achieve his goal, which was to rebuild his business. And so then we got into the details of how do you make that story vivid? Does it have dialogue? Not just saying, well, the IRS said that I should do this, but let us picture them coming to the door. Let us picture them. Let's hear them say the dialogue. We can't tell you why, but you're under investigation with the IRS, and so on. So it's the same basic structure. It's the same basic method. You're still going to create a story about a hero. It might be you if you're an entrepreneur, or it might be someone you have helped. Okay, so it might be that you have a client or a customer and they had a goal similar to the people you're trying to persuade to work with you. So you tell the story about how that person had a goal similar to your prospects and how they had to overcome the obstacles you helped them overcome in order to achieve that goal. And now your audience is actually being given the emotional experience of succeeding by working with you because they've identified with the hero of that story and they want to be just like the client you already helped to success.
Very interesting. But many people might say, my story is not that interesting. I don't have the IRS coming after me. So what would you say to them?
Well, okay. Anyone listening to this, at some point in your life, you have succeeded at accomplishing something. And if it was something that meant a lot to you, I could pretty much guarantee you had to overcome obstacles to achieve that goal. So if you tell a story about yourself at a time when you either were desperate to overcome a conflict, maybe you'd been given a medical diagnosis, maybe you felt very alone and you wanted to get love in your life and you wanted to find the person of your dreams. Maybe you were miserable in your job and you wanted to become self-employed. But it could be anything because the story is not emotional because of the worldwide scope of what you wanted. It's because you wanted it desperately. And we've all in our lives had the experience of wanting something that we didn't believe we could have or seemed too hard and out of reach. So if you say, I was desperate to do X, and these are the obstacles I had to overcome, and then tell us how you were able to overcome those obstacles. And so you cross that finish line and achieve that goal. That's going to be an emotionally involving story. And if you're in business and that story is either about how you succeeded at building your business by using the principles you're now going to give to your audience, then it's going to connect with them on a deeper level. And that's going to be what makes it persuasive for them. A lot of people say nobody care about my story, similar to what you just said, because I'm not anybody special. You said it in an interesting way. You said, I've never accomplished anything like that. But somebody says, well, I never climbed a mountain. I'm not a world leader. I'm not a celebrity and so on. And my answer to that is always, that's to your advantage. Because though it may seem like that's what we want to hear, when we want to hear stories about celebrities, we really want to hear the stories about how they overcame obstacles to succeed or become celebrities or to achieve whatever they did. Because we like stories about ordinary people who become extraordinary. And even if you want to go into the movie theater and look at Marvel movies, every Marvel superhero, the first movie they're in is the one that establishes how they became a superhero. So we're not rooting for Spider-Man, we're rooting for Peter Parker and how he, after being bitten by this spider, became Superman and was able to deal with and handle and finally use those powers to overcome supervillains and so on.
So what are mistakes storytellers make, be it on the stage or writing a story on a blog? What are the mistakes you absolutely have to avoid?
Well, probably the biggest weakness of most stories I encounter, and this has been true not just in business, but in Hollywood. I encounter this all the time, is the story is too complicated. When we're coming up with stories to tell, there's this kind of subconscious whispering we hear or some idea we have that says, when in doubt, add plot. Because, stories are hard work. I mean, you got to think about it and it takes work and so on. It's not, they don't pop out. The idea might pop out of your head in an instant, but actually getting it down and writing it. So when you're trying to figure out what are the obstacles, how do I put this on the page? How do I say this from the stage so it's involving? And you don't know what's going to happen next. The temptation is, well, I'll just talk about this thing, or I'm going to talk about everything that went on in my life before I finally had this new job and accomplished the goal I'm going to tell you about. In other words, it becomes meandering and tangential, which are just nice words for boring. The problem is those stories become boring because you haven't given us something that we're emotionally involved in, that we're rooting for. And now we're just hearing the story or reading the story. We're not experiencing the story. And the solution to that, it's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. And that is make sure everything in the story stays focused on the goal the hero is trying to achieve, the visible finish line they want to cross that's very specific and we can envision, and the obstacles that overcome it. And every moment of that story, everything you include has to either move the hero closer to the goal or create another obstacle to it.
Yeah, very interesting.
I mean, that was only the first one. Well, the next things are, it's not structured particularly. In other words, the sequences are not all included that need to be there. I mean, in my process, I say there are sort of 6 steps you have to take that hero through. You have to create a setup where we're introduced to them and we start empathizing with them. There's a crisis where they first decide, oh, I've got to do something about this new problem. There's the pursuit, the steps they take to achieve it. There's the conflict, the obstacles they have to overcome. There has to be the climax, the moment of victory when they achieve the goal. And then finally, and one that's usually left out, and it's another weakness of a lot of stories, there's the aftermath. There's the picture you're presenting, the image you're presenting in the movie inside your listener's mind of the new life that this character is now living because they've accomplished the goal. And all of these steps grow out. You go to any movie that comes out of Hollywood, you're going to see those same 6 steps. And so when you know those, that gives you a guide to say, okay, I want to make sure these 6 things or these 6 sequences occur in the story.
So tell us why the aftermath is so important.
Because generically, like even in a movie, it's important because it gives us an emotional, an opportunity to feel, to experience the emotion, the heightened emotion that's created when the hero wins. Okay. And so you'll see that in almost every movie. Now, okay, now that Hitch has declared his love for Sarah Milas in Hitch, in that love story, let's see what life they're living now that they're a couple. Or let's see what's happened now that the serial killer is destroyed or that the aliens have been conquered or whatever. In business, though, in a certain way, I'd say it becomes even more critical in business because remember, your story is designed to move people to take action that you are trying to persuade them to take. And you need to present them with a picture of the new life they want to be living after they achieve the goal. So it's one thing to say, well, and my client's goal was to make $100,000. And finally they did it. They closed the deal or they got the new job or whatever it was, and they've got $100,000. Well, that's all nice. But the real thing the audience wants more deeply, or your prospects or your followers, whatever way you want to say it, is they want their life to change. In the internet marketing world where I do a lot of work, the thing that new internet marketers want and continue to want more than anything is they want to flourish, they want wealth, they want independence, and they want to have a good life for their family. That's almost universal. So when you end with a picture of them now being, flourishing and doing something with their family they couldn't do before, or going on a cruise, or they have a mountain cabin, or just they're able to go to Little League games they weren't able to go to in that crummy job they had, that solidifies, okay, this person, meaning you, this person who wants me to take this action, I want to live like that person did in the story. They may not want to have a mountain cabin, but I want freedom and independence and wealth. And so now they're much more likely to follow the advice you're giving them or to take the action you want them to achieve that life.
Very interesting. So really, that last part of the storytelling is super important to instigate your listeners to take action.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Those 6 steps I mentioned, they're all basically essential. You can shortcut. I mean, you can use those steps, those principles, even when you're asking somebody for a testimonial. Because if the testimonial says, I didn't know what I was going to do about X. And then I found about, Catherine or whatever. And when they had me do this, I was able to overcome these obstacles and achieve what I wanted. And now my life is like this. And I took more words to describe what the testimonial would be than actually writing that testimonial. And so that's why those are good testimonials, because immediately they take us on that quick journey of saying, this is what it'll be like for me if I work with this person.
Yeah, even in testimonials that are very short. So you need to know with the situation before, the challenge, and the life after.
Yeah, exactly.
And that will instigate people to take action, from what I hear.
Well, that's well, that's the goal. That's what we're hoping. Yeah,
that's the goal, because
that's what your goal. I mean, to stay in business, you have, no matter what business you're in, when you're listening to this podcast, you basically have one career, and it's the same career we've all got, and that is you're a problem solver.
Right.
Because people are coming to you with even in Hollywood, the basic problem is I'm bored and I want to be entertained. And so the movies that make a lot of money are more entertaining than the movies that don't. And so whatever the problem is you're solving, that's convincing people that you will be the best person for them to solve the problem they're facing. That's what the story will do more powerfully than things like data or diagrams or facts and figures or your background and so on. Now, all those things are important, by the way. You don't get up, tell a story, walk off the stage and not say, this is what I'd like you to do. You back it up with data, with facts and figures, with more idea of how you do this, or look at how efficient our process is and so on. But first, you hook them with the story.
So you said the first mistake is having a story that's too complicated, that is not focused on the goal of the protagonist and on the protagonist trying to overcome obstacles. And the second mistake is not being structured, which you said is a setup, the crisis, the pursuit, the conflict, and the aftermath. Is there any other big mistakes we should avoid?
Well, the next, or an additional mistake, I don't know if they're in order of priority, but another one is when you're telling the story that you are being vivid and specific, not broad and general. The way I think you've heard me say this, in events we've been to together, and that is too many stories are broad and shallow, and they should be narrow and deep.
So give the listeners a few examples.
Well, the bad example is, off the top of my head, is hard. It's when in your story you say, the hero was miserable in their job. So they started working with me, and then I took them through our process, and now they're happy in their job. Now, that's too brief, but for an example, with a few embellishments, I hear that story a lot. But the problem is, instead of saying my client was miserable in their job, paint a picture of them at their job being miserable. So an example, Lisa Campbell was a bookkeeper who then became a financial advisor by expanding the offer she could make to her clients. And then she started a program to help other bookkeepers do that. And she has a whole program and class and ways that she does that. And so she was writing a book about that process for Niche Press, is a publisher I work with very closely. And so I worked with her on the whole book, working on the stories. And so she had to get across how miserable she was as a bookkeeper, dealing with clients she didn't want to work with, working long hours. They were pestering her. She didn't have any time of her own. And so her story started with her saying very much those words. And so in working with her, I would say, okay, but tell me about a day that you did that. When is the time that you really felt this is just not working for me? And so she opens the book with a story about how she is on vacation with her family. They're all outside this cabin that they had rented for a week in the summer or something like that. Her husband and kids are outside having a lot of fun. She's inside having to put together a tax document that one of her obnoxious clients had told her at the last minute she's got to do. And so she's not getting to have a vacation at all. And she's feel like this is miserable. This is not what I want to be doing. Okay. Now, even as I just said that, as you heard that, I guarantee you were picturing kids and a husband playing outside at a cabin. She made it more vivid when we're done, but it's the very opening passage of her book, because that's vivid and specific. And we heard the dialogue. Her husband said something sarcastic about her not being able to come outside. And so it's that vividness, that specificity. And the goal of one of the ways she expressed the goal, or we came up with it, she said, I would just like one day at work where I don't have to deal with any obnoxious client and I can go home at 5:00 to be with my family. And that's vivid enough that at the end of that, she described a day where she was able to do that. And that was the climax of the story. And then she went on to say, and now my life is like this because I have become a financial advisor. So it's getting down to those sort of small, vivid details. So where you're actually projecting a movie inside the head of your listener or your reader or whoever. And because that draws us into the world you've created, and we are participating in a story instead of just hearing sort of broad, generalized statements that we understand but aren't emotionally involving.
What a wonderful example. Thank you. We're coming to the end of our podcast, so I want to be sure that our listeners know how to contact you.
Sure. My website is storymastery.com. Storymastery with a Y on the end.com. And if you go there, you can see gobs of articles and so on about storytelling, both for Hollywood and for business, and, my schedule and how you can work with me and so on. And also, in addition to that, I want to offer a freebie for everybody that you can get more details about. One thing, I was talking about those 6 steps, what I call the 6-step success story process. It's just those 6 things I mentioned: setup and crisis and so on. So if you go to storymastery.com/6SSS for 6-step success story, if you go to that link, then you can download a chart that not only shows the 6 steps, but it details what needs to happen in each one of those in succession and how you can introduce those elements into the story you're crafting for your next speech or for the chapter of your book or for your next blog or to tell the story on a podcast, whatever it might be. So if you go to that link, you can have that free and you'll have a better idea about those 6 steps.
So storymastery.com/6 steps?
No, 6SSS. So numeral 6 and then the letter S 3 times.
Okay, there, good. Well, these will be in the show notes, of course.
Good.
Wonderful. Good. Thank you so very much. So interesting. So very interesting. Thank you, Michael.
Well, it was fun. Yes. I hope it's helpful to everyone. And I hope to hear from you as you're working on your story and let me know how it's going.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. You can subscribe to all future podcasts at excellentexecutivecoaching.com. Join us each Wednesday to learn more about the latest trends in leadership techniques and bring your coaching to the next level. To learn more about Dr. Burris's CEO Mastermind, use the contact form at excellentexecutivecoaching.com.